After a break from our travels, we decide to take a winter trip. That means heading south.
After flying to Dallas, we had a 17-hour flight to Sydney, where we'll be catching a Holland America cruise around New Zealand and southern Australia.
After our long flight, we get our first glimpse of dawn over Sydney Harbor. We have a couple of days before our cruise, and we have a long day planned as soon as we touch down.
After a short train ride from the airport to downtown, we were excited to find out that we could check in early. Even though it's midsummer here, there's plenty of reminders that it's still the holiday season.
We are heading over to Bondee Beach by way of Bondee Junction, where we wandered the pedestrian mall and grabbed a quick bite to eat. We passed up on these heavier meat pies for some Vietnamese spring rolls before catching the bus to the beach. Our plan is to take the Bondee to Koji Walk, a trail that takes you along the cliffs between the two beaches. All along the beaches we noticed the Norfolk pines. Later we were told that we would see these all along the coast. The first of these were planted by the European explorers, since their tall straight trunks were easily made into masts for the sailing ships.
In hindsight, planning a full-day hike around the coast probably wasn't the greatest of ideas, especially after a 17-hour flight. We later realized there was plenty to do if we'd have just stayed in town.
One of our reasons for taking this walk was to see an exhibit called Sculptures by the Sea, but we must have misread the dates because the exhibit had already closed a week earlier. This is the Olympic-sized pool at the Bondee Iceberg Club, open to the public for a small fee. Fighting the wind, showers, and the exhaustion from the long flight, we don't make the whole walk, but pick up a bus to shorten the journey. Our next stop is Watson's Bay, hoping to pick up some fish and chips from the famous Doyle's restaurant. But we couldn't swallow the $45 a plate charge, so we ordered some at the takeaway stand for a low $15 apiece. Greeting us outside of Doyle's was this large Australian pelican, apparently quite used to the crowds. Well, it's getting late, so we take the ferry back to Circular Quay, the main port in downtown Sydney. The trip gives us our first close-up look at Harbour Bridge and the Sydney Opera House. So we're back in downtown Sydney. It's time to head toward the hotel and get some sleep.
The next morning, we were up early to catch a tour that's going to take us to the Blue Mountains.
Their name comes from the dense eucalyptus stands, which gives them a blue hue when seen from a distance.
We stopped in the village of Lenore, where we had some hot drinks and some pastries. And after a quick stroll around Main Street, we were back on the road again.
As we head up into the mountains, the scenery becomes lush, and the clouds turn into a dense fog. Our destination is Scenic World, where we start our tour with a tram ride. Luckily, the fog starts to break up, and we can get glimpses of the spectacular rugged scenery.
The Blue Mountains is 5 times the size of Hong Kong and 2 times the size of America's Grand Canyon National Park at 10,300 square kilometers in size.
I was so focused on the wonderful scenery that I didn't even notice I was standing on a glass panel.
Now folks, welcome to Scenic World if it is your first time, and welcome back for those who it isn't. And folks, you're entering on level 3. Level 3 is also home to the restaurant.
Our next ride, and yes, it does feel like a Disneyland ride, is on an inclined railway, which was used between 1928 and 1945 to carry coal from the mines below. Now it's more of an amusement park ride, even set to the theme of Jurassic Park.
Platform, and congratulations on riding on the steepest railway in the entire universe that we know of. When we do come to a complete stop, folks, doors on the left will open from now.
Once we're down at the bottom, we're treated to the wonderful views of the Jameson Valley, including the rock formation called the Three Sisters.
The park had a number of elevated wooden paths that meandered throughout the forest, and there were many types of ferns everywhere, both small and large.
This is a recreation of an old mining cabin, dating back to the turn of the century. Once down at the base of the valley, we waited for a cable car to take us back to the top.
Pretty big girl too. She's about 922 metres above sea level. Only one you can physically walk out and touch since 2000. You'll see a little bridge called Honeymoon Bridge. If you do have enough time, recommend it. It's got some great views, but enough about them. Front window, there's a sandstone pillar. It is pretty important if you've been up and down on the railway. That's actually where the tracks are. Unfortunately, it hasn't had much action since 1974. That's the year they deemed it unsafe due to rock erosion, shut it down. And also, mudslide wipes out the access point. So if you are thinking about climbing it, I'll give you one word of advice: don't. And if you do, good luck to you.
Once we're back on the bus, we get a parting view of the valley.
Have a look at this corner here, out to the left. You'll be able to see the Three Sisters on the way out, if you're lucky.
We thought we were going to have lunch at Wentworth Falls, but apparently we're having lunch here at the Conversation Hut in the town of Wentworth Falls. It was a rather bland and disappointing meal, but we did go outside and enjoy the view. Our last stop is the Featherdale Wildlife Park, a 7-acre zoo owned by a couple who originally started it as a poultry farm. The park was quite nice, and it was our first experience with the local animals, like this southern cassowary and the laughing kookaburra. Also, a number of the animals are free to roam with the visitors, including the wallaby and these eastern gray kangaroos. During our trip, we were supposed to see a number of penguins in the wild, but we were never able to see much of them. These are called little penguins, and were really our best encounter during the trip. These are Australian fruit bats, also known as flying foxes. We'll actually see some in the wild later on in the trip. When petting these wombats, I was surprised how strong and muscular they were. These birds certainly aren't happy this goanna is up in their tree. The name goanna covers a number of different large monitor lizards found in Australia. And of course, you can't forget the sleepy koala.
The last leg of our tour is a ferry ride down the Parramatta River, which empties into the Sydney Bay.
Heading back to Circle Quay, it's time to try and find some dinner. We end up at Chat Thai for some mango smoothies and some interesting Thai dishes.
The next morning, we're off to the area called the Rocks for the Friday foodie market. It was a bit of what I would call a poofter, since there was only a handful of vendors.
Wanting something filling for breakfast, we decided on a Turkish gazlume, basically a Turkish flatbread, with beef, mushrooms, spinach, cheese, and Turkish salami. It was tasty and quite filling, but without much more to do here, we take the train down to Market City and a place called Paddy's Market. The market was a lot bigger than we expected, selling everything from seafood and produce to shirts, leather goods, wigs, anything you can imagine. We ended up with a couple of t-shirts, a sweatshirt, and I ended up buying an Australian leather hat. Well, it's getting late, so we call an Uber and we're soon at White Bay Cruise Terminal, where we meet our ship for our 27-day cruise aboard Holland America's Noordam. With more left to see on our return trip, we're soon sailing under Harbour Bridge, heading toward New Zealand, saying our short farewell to Sydney.